Scary telling.
I had never been able to see the world as others did. I was born with a condition that made my vision blurry, and as I grew older, it only got worse. But it was when my father died that my world truly became dark. My mother had always been a bit distant, but after my father passed away, she became cold and bitter. Her eyes were filled with anger whenever she looked at me. I tried to ignore it, but her resentment was palpable. One day, I woke up and found myself unable to see anything at all. Panic set in as I groped around my room, trying to make sense of my surroundings. My mother seemed unbothered, simply telling me that I was blind and that I needed to learn to live with it. But I couldn't just accept my blindness without a fight. I knew there had to be a reason why it happened so suddenly, and I was determined to find out what it was. I had heard stories of the red-throated loons that lived by the melted lake. They were known to have the power to reveal hidden truths and provide guidance to those in need. I knew I had to seek them out. My sister was the only one who believed me and was willing to help. She was my eyes in this dark world, and I trusted her to lead me to the lake. We set out early one morning, our journey long and arduous. The first obstacle we faced was the rough terrain. I stumbled and fell numerous times, but my sister never once complained. She patiently guided me through rocky paths and treacherous slopes until we finally arrived at the melted lake. As we approached, I felt a sense of anticipation and fear. I had never been to the lake before, and the stories I had heard about it made me uneasy. The water was dark and murky, with steam rising from its surface. The air was thick with the smell of sulfur. I heard the red-throated loon before I saw it. It let out a piercing cry that echoed across the lake. My sister helped me to the edge of the water, and the loon appeared before us. Its feathers were a deep shade of red, and its eyes were bright and intelligent. I greeted it respectfully and asked for its guidance. The loon listened patiently, and then it revealed to me the truth that I had been seeking. My mother had put dirty whale fat in my eyes, causing me to lose my vision. The loon's revelation was like a blow to my gut. I had always known that my mother resented me, but I never thought she would go this far. I thanked the loon for its help and turned to my sister, tears streaming down my face. She held me close, and I knew that we would face the truth together. My sister and I returned home in silence. I was still reeling from the revelation that my own mother had caused my blindness. I felt betrayed and angry, but I also felt a glimmer of hope. Now that I knew the truth, I could start to take steps to regain my sight. I asked my sister to take me back to the melted lake so I could speak to the red-throated loon again. She agreed without hesitation, and we set out once more on our journey. This time, the journey was even more difficult. The weather was colder, and the terrain was more treacherous. But my sister never wavered in her determination to help me. She guided me through the rough paths, supporting me when I stumbled and lifting me over obstacles. When we arrived at the melted lake, I was relieved to see that the red-throated loon was there waiting for me. I approached it respectfully and asked for its help in regaining my sight. The loon was silent for a moment, considering my request. Then it spoke, its voice ringing clear and strong across the lake. It said that it could help me, but it would come at a steep cost. I asked what the cost would be, and the loon replied that I would have to dive into the lake and retrieve a rare and valuable stone from the bottom. The stone was said to have the power to restore sight to the blind, but it was guarded by dangerous creatures that lurked in the depths. My sister and I looked at each other, both of us unsure of what to do. But then I remembered the hope I had felt earlier, the hope that I could regain my sight. I made up my mind then and there I would do whatever it took to get that stone. My sister helped me into the water, and I swam towards the bottom of the lake. The water was colder than anything I had ever felt before, and the pressure was immense. But I pushed forward, determined to retrieve the stone. As I swam deeper, I saw dark shapes moving in the distance. They were the creatures the loon had warned me about, and they were getting closer. I could feel their cold, dead eyes watching me as I dove deeper into the abyss. But then I saw the stone, shining like a beacon in the darkness. I reached for it, my fingers brushing against its smooth surface. The creatures closed in, their razor-sharp teeth glinting in the dim light. I swam as fast as I could, my heart pounding in my chest. Finally, I broke the surface of the water, gasping for air. My sister helped me back to the shore, and I collapsed onto the ground, exhausted but exhilarated. I had done it. I had retrieved the stone that would restore my sight. As I lay on the ground, catching my breath, my sister picked up the stone and examined it closely. It was a beautiful shade of blue, smooth and polished to perfection. We looked up at the red-throated loon, waiting for it to fulfill its end of the bargain. It flew down and perched on a nearby tree branch, watching us with its intelligent eyes. I held out my hand, ready to receive the gift of sight. But the loon hesitated, and then it spoke. "The stone will restore your vision, but it comes at a price," it said. "Once you have regained your sight, you will see things that you may not want to see. Are you sure you are ready for the truth?" I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what the loon meant. But then I thought back to the revelation about my mother and the betrayal I had felt. I knew that the truth could be painful, but I was willing to face it. "I'm ready," I said, holding out my hand once again. The loon nodded, and then it touched the stone to my forehead. I felt a surge of energy course through my body, and then everything went dark. For a moment, I thought that the loon had tricked me. But then I saw a glimmer of light, and it grew brighter and brighter until my vision was filled with colors and shapes. I could see. My sister's face swam into view, and I could see the joy and relief in her eyes. She helped me up, and we walked back home, my hand firmly in hers. As we walked, I saw things that I had never noticed before: the colors of the flowers by the roadside, the way the leaves on the trees rustled in the wind. It was overwhelming, but it was also beautiful. But as we approached our home, I felt a sense of dread. What would I see when I faced my mother again? Would the truth be too much to bear? My sister sensed my hesitation, and she squeezed my hand reassuringly. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together," she said. I nodded, grateful for her support. But I knew that the red-throated loon's warning was not to be taken lightly. The truth might be painful, but I was determined to face it head-on. The next day, I decided to confront my mother about the truth that the red-throated loon had revealed. I was nervous, but I knew that I couldn't keep the truth bottled up inside any longer. I entered her room and found her sitting at her desk, reading a book. She looked up as I entered, and her eyes widened in surprise when she saw that I could see. "Mother, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady. She looked at me, and for a moment, I thought that I saw a flicker of guilt in her eyes. But then she composed herself and said, "Of course, dear. What do you want to talk about?" I took a deep breath and said, "I know what you did to me. You put dirty whale fat in my eyes and caused me to go blind." There was a moment of silence as she processed my words. Then she said, "I don't know what you're talking about. I would never do something like that to you." I felt a surge of anger and frustration. How could she deny something that was so obviously true? But before I could say anything, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was my sister, and she was looking at me with concern in her eyes. "Let's go," she said. "We've said what we needed to say." I nodded, knowing that she was right. As we left the room, I could feel my anger simmering beneath the surface. But then I remembered the red-throated loon's warning that I would see things I might not want to see. I decided to take a walk to clear my head. As I walked, I noticed something strange. The colors around me were fading, and the world was becoming darker. It was like a veil had been lifted, revealing the truth beneath. I saw the way my mother looked at me with resentment and anger, as if I was the cause of all her problems. I saw the way she spoke to my sister, dismissive and cruel. I saw the lies she told to her friends and family, painting herself as the victim and me as the problem. It was all too much, and I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me. I stumbled, trying to keep my balance, but it was too late. I felt myself sinking into the ground, as if the weight of the truth was pulling me down. Suddenly, I was back in the lake, sinking deeper and deeper. I could feel the creatures closing in, their jaws snapping at my heels. But then I saw light in the distance, and I swam towards it with all my strength. As I broke the surface of the water, gasping for air, I saw the red-throated loon looking at me with concern in its eyes. "Are you all right?" it asked. I nodded, still trying to catch my breath. But then I realized something. I was back in the lake, and I could see. The world around me was dark and murky, but I could see the shapes of the creatures and the way the light played on the water. I smiled, grateful for the gift of sight. But then I felt a tug on my arm, and I looked down to see the red-throated loon pulling me deeper into the water. I tried to fight it, but it was too strong. As we sank deeper and deeper, I felt the weight of the truth pulling me down, and I knew that I might never resurface. I struggled to keep my head above water as the red-throated loon pulled me deeper and deeper into the lake. I could feel my lungs burning for air, my vision growing blurry as the darkness enveloped me. Just as I thought I couldn't hold on any longer, the loon released its grip on my wrist, and I shot to the surface. I gasped for air, my body convulsing with coughs and sputters as I tried to catch my breath. As I stumbled out of the water, I saw my mother waiting for me. She looked at me with a mixture of fear and confusion, but I could see the guilt in her eyes. I confronted her about the truth, about the betrayal she had committed against me. She tried to deny it, but I could see through her lies. Finally, she admitted the truth, confessing to the act that had caused me to go blind. I felt a surge of anger and betrayal, the weight of the truth settling heavily on my shoulders. I had trusted her, and she had taken advantage of my vulnerability. But then, something inside me shifted. The red-throated loon's warning echoed in my head, reminding me that I would see things I might not want to see. And yet, I had ignored the warning, seeking revenge instead of forgiveness. I realized then that the only way to move forward was to let go of the anger and resentment. I had to forgive my mother, not for her sake, but for mine. As I made peace with the truth, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The world around me became clearer, the colors brighter, and the air sweeter. I had finally come to terms with the truth, and it had set me free. In the end, I realized that the red-throated loon had been right all along. The truth could be painful, but it was necessary. And sometimes, the only way to move forward was to let go of the past and embrace the present. With a newfound sense of clarity, I turned to my mother and offered her forgiveness. She looked at me, her eyes filled with tears, and we embraced. It was a small step towards healing, but it was a step nonetheless. As we walked back home, I felt a sense of peace settling over me. The truth had been revealed, and it had set me free.